Alright everyone, Voodoo 51292 and welcome to the very first video of the new video series called Voodoo's Thoughts. And this is where I basically discuss with you some hot button issues that I run across. I present arguments from both sides and then give you my thoughts and where I stand on the subject, and basically just spark a little debate maybe, give some credit to some of these issues that are coming up, mainly with gaming, but they don't always have to be. But for our first video today, it is going to be a subject related to gaming, and it's going to be a trend that we are now seeing with game developers since EA began this trend last year. And this is the trend of not game developers, but game publishers requiring codes for your games in order to access the online content, the online play, and sometimes even some unlockables in games. And basically, to tell you how this all came about, last year Electronic Arts began something that they call the EA Online Pass, and basically it means that with every game they release, if the developer so chooses, they will initiate this EA Online Pass, where basically every game they release has a specific code to that game, that when you go on to the game itself, you need to enter this specific code in order to access the online gameplay and all online content on the game. If you do not have this code, you cannot play online and can't access the online content, obviously. Basically, after EA began it last year, some other game developers, or excuse me, game publishers, I'm going to keep making that mistake, some other game publishers have begun to copy this trend in the exact same fashion. One to do it earlier this year was THQ and their game Homefront, which you need a code to play. So obviously when I get that game from Gamefly, I will not be able to play the multiplayer because I will not have a code. And I was reading this morning when I got up the Gamefly news on my iPod app, and I ran across a story that was just released. It said now it is in the works that the game publisher Warner Brothers is also going to be going to this online pass service, and Warner Brothers are behind series like the Fear franchise, as well as the Batman Arkham series, Arkham Asylum, and then Arkham City later this year, as well as the brand new reboot of Mortal Kombat coming out in just a couple of weeks. And so when I read that this morning, I figured, well, what a perfect thing to begin this video series with, to talk about this issue that's really going to be a hot button as we move forward, as more game publishers decide to go this way. So basically now I want to give you the both perspectives, the game developers and the game publishers' perspective when they say, this is something that we need to do, that we want to do to be fair to us who are providing the games. And then I'm going to give you the consumer, obviously myself, who rents most of these games from Gamefly, is a consumer directly affected by this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you the consumer's point of view, saying, hey, you guys are ripping us off and this isn't fair. And then at the end I'm going to tell you which side that I actually go with and why, and you might be pretty surprised. So first, let's start with the game developers side. Basically, this is plain and simple a ploy by the game publishers to strongly encourage the consumer to buy their games brand new. Because obviously if you buy the game brand new, then you get the code, and it's no problem. You can put the code in and you get access to your online content. However, if you buy the game used, or if you rent the game through a Gamefly or Blockbuster like I do, then you're not going to be able to play the online. If you rent it, there's no chance because the renters do not give you the online code. If you buy the game used, unless the guy in front of you who bought the game first, for whatever reason, didn't use his code, then you're not going to be able to play the game, because chances are he did use the code, and therefore the code is no longer valid. So the game publishers want you to buy the game brand new, and you know, here their take is, well, you know, we're getting ripped off because people are now with Blockbuster, GameFly, and you know, places like GameStop who sell these games used. They're saying, well, you know, 3 out of the 4 ways to get this game is not paying us full price. The only way, the one way to get full price is to buy it new, but you can buy it used. You can rent the game. Well, I guess 2 out of 3, I should say. There's 2 out of the 3 ways to play the game aren't paying full price, buying the game used or renting the game. And they're saying, well, that's not fair to us because we're losing all this money because people aren't buying the game new. Now, I obviously don't know how much money they're actually losing. I would find it hard to believe that this is a necessity. With as big as games are now, I would find it really hard to believe that these companies are losing money. But you know, you never know for sure. I don't know their books. I don't know how much money they're making or losing a year. But basically, this is them saying, well, listen, to entice people to buy the game brand new, we're going to put this code system out there so that if they don't buy the game new, then they're not going to have access to all the online features, and therefore they might want to go buy the game new and get the online features so that they'll buy the game new. You know, if they still want to buy our game used or rent, that's perfectly fine, but they're not going to have access to the online content. So that's basically the game developer stance. We want more money. It's not fair for us to keep losing money and for people not to pay full price and still getting the full game. So, you know, as a reward for people who buy the full game, we're going to give them, you know, access to the online. But for people who don't pay full price, well, if you don't pay full price, you shouldn't have access to the full game. Therefore, you don't. So that's the game developer's take. On my side, the consumer side, the take is, well, that's not fair. Because renting the game and buying the game used are perfectly legitimate ways to for us to play your game, and they have been for some time. And it's not fair for you because all the years before, multiplayer was just part of the game. It was part of your game when you developed it and released it. So now what you're saying is that we only get to play half of a game. It's not fair for you, the developer, to cut half the game out for those of us who don't have that kind of money and who want to rent or, you know, buy the game pre-owned. It's not fair for you to cut off half of your game that you've already developed for, you know, for us to have to suffer and not be able to play your full game. Another take on it is, you know, well, if you're worried about your game not being you know, bought new, well, why don't you make your game good enough so that people want to buy it new? For instance, the BioShock series, the Resistance series, and now the Portal series are all series for me that as those games come out, I'm going to buy them new because I enjoyed the other games so much that I want to go buy and own a copy of the new games. And people are saying, well, you know, as a game publisher, if you don't publish good games, then your punishment is that people won't buy your game brand new. So it's your job, the game developers and the game publishers, to make really good games and be rewarded by people buying your games, you know, subsequently as they're released. So that's a consumer side of it. You know, we don't have as much money. We don't have money to buy all these new games, and but you know, we shouldn't get punished for that. So those are the two sides. What side do I stand on? What side do I agree with? Well, actually, to you know, to shock you, I am actually on the side of the game publishers with this online system. One thing I did forget to mention is that actually if you rent the game or buy the game used and the online code is not active, you can actually buy through the PSN or Xbox Live a new online pass for $10. And that's pretty much the standard fee for all publishers who are going to this, is $10, and you can get an online code. So you can still do it, but you have to pay extra. And I actually agree with them, and here's why. I fully believe that if you pay full price for the game, that you should have full access to the game. However, if you're renting the game or buying the game used, you're not paying full price, and therefore you should not get access to the full game. Now, I definitely feel that way about renting. The used games is kind of an in-between limbo for me, because no, you're not paying for the full game, but at the same time you're paying for a used copy, meaning that somebody has already bought that copy of the game for $60 and you're buying it again for a reduced price, but at the same time you have to now face the the consequences that you now have a pre-owned game. I think that if you buy the pre-owned game, that you should not need a code, and that the place where you buy the pre-owned game should provide you with a code, because your consequence is that you're buying a used game. You're not renting the game, playing it for a couple of days, and back. You actually purchased the game, but it's used, and that in itself is the punishment for not buying the game brand new. But I think that they should reward people who want to spend the whole $60 on the game. As I mentioned before, with the BioShock, Resistance, Portal series, I'm going to buy those games because I like them so much, and I'm dedicated to those companies, and I want to support them making those games. However, I would be a little upset if I went and dropped $60 on the game, but Joe Schmo down the street gets the game from GameFly, and he can play the entire game as well, but he paid $16 that month, and this is the third game he's rented that month, and he can play the entire game, the same version of the game that I can play, except I had to pay $60 for it, whereas he just rented it through a service. That would upset me, because if I'm a dedicated fan to the franchises, and I want to go and drop $60 on the game, then I should be rewarded with with full access to the game. Now, another side of the consumer may say, well, it's not fair for you to cut off the multiplayer of the game, so if you want to add incentives to people who buy the game new, then add something else. Add different game modes in the online. Add different online maps. Add multiplayer skins. Add a unique weapon in the campaign. Add something like that as incentive. Don't cut out part of your game completely. And I can understand that. I can understand that side of the consumer argument that says, don't cut out a part of your game as an incentive, but add to it, if you know what I'm saying. Don't cut your game in half and give it to the people who rent and buy it used, but add more to the full game and give all of it to the people who buy the new ones, if you follow what I'm saying. We will split the video here, and when I come back I'll give my final thoughts on this interesting topic, and talk to you a little bit about how you can give feedback on this topic as well. So make sure you come back for the conclusion of the first video in the Voodoo Thought series.